was sitting on the school steps as all of the other kids ran and played football around him, as if he was invisible, that he met Tinker. It was a true blessing. Charlie had his head in a comic as usual, and he looked up to see a friendly face, and from that moment on they became fast friends. Meeting up with Tinker had helped him get through everything. They didn't have to say much, they understood each other. It was like telepathy. Tinker sat at the dinner table watching his mum eating her meal like a church mouse. Jasper, his dad, attacked his steak with his fork like he was trying to kill it again. How was school? He said to Tinker with a hard stare. He was interested, but he just wanted to criticize, so he couldn't help himself. Tim swallowed his steak with a thin, pained smile. It was okay, Dad, he said, hoping that would be enough conversation, but it wasn't. Call me Jasper, he said sternly, and once again the air crackled with tension. It was inevitable. Tell me more, Jasper said. Give me some details, he said forcibly. It was difficult for Tinker to elaborate, as he found school deadly dull. He had tried to pretend to be enthusiastic, which wasn't easy. Tinker was dreading his end of school report, as he knew that Jasper would be taking his belt to him. This steak is very tough, his dad said, looking at Mary. You need to learn how to cook, he said, spitting out a piece of steak onto the plate in disgust. It's starting, thought Tinker, as he began to shake and he was struggling to hold on to his knife and fork. His mum tried to excuse herself. Sit down, she said, using all of the authority that he'd learned in the Navy, but with none of the respect. I'll be seeing your grade soon, and don't you dare disappoint me, his dad said. I won't, said Tinker, trying his best to sound confident. He didn't see the hand that swept across the table, but he felt its sting. Address me properly, his dad said. His dad expected to be called Sir, even at home. His mum began to cry, but no tears fell. She was all out of tears. Hello, viewers. Tinker finished his meal under the cold, critical eye of his dad. Eventually he was allowed to go to bed. Tinker washed his face in the sink, but the red mark wouldn't go away. Tinker never told Charlie about his home life, as he didn't want to appear weak. He knew that Charlie needed him and that he relied upon him. Hello, viewers. That night Tinker lay in bed and he tried to remember when he was last happy, and he tried to remember a time when his parents didn't argue and fight. In fact, it was impossible. Hello, viewers. Please sub me if you like it. They were both pleased to see the start of a new day. There were so many hours stretched in front of them that the days seemed endless. Tinker was glad to get out of the house after the tense situation of the night before. His face was still hurting and he could hear his dad's messing about in the garage. The last thing he wanted to do was to help him. Tinker had spent most of the night washing and rubbing his face, and he had only managed to make it look far less obvious. A little less obvious. Hi, Charlie, he said. Fancy another adventure? Sure, said Tinker. What do you have in mind? He said with excited eyes. The truth be told, Tinker didn't have a clue, but when he saw a group of boys heading to the local Lido, he knew where they were going. Charlie hadn't been swimming in ages. He remembered having lessons, but he couldn't stand the cold water. To him it was like torture, and he hoped that the water would be at least warm and bearable. The last thing he wanted to do was to embarrass himself by shivering in front of everyone. What's that on your face? Said Charlie, looking concerned as Tinker tried to wipe away the bruise. Oh, it's nothing, said Tinker with a shrug. I walked into a door, he added, not very convincingly. Charlie believed him, as he believed most of the things he said. The sun came out again as they approached the swimming pool, and it was full of people. And mums and dads and youngsters sat by the shimmering pool, splashing about in the water, or dozing in deck chairs with their faces covered by multicolored towels. Charlie and Tinker were fortunate to get in for free. But Tinker had a way of persuading most people out of anything. Charlie wasn't keen on going into the water. He hated crowds and noise, and he wasn't comfortable. He found an abandoned deck chair and he lay back and he watched the day go by. Watch the day go by. Page 32, 23. Tinker wasn't hesitant at all. He jumped right in with an almighty splash, and the other boys and girls in the pool scattered like ants. Hello, viewers. Charlie watched him swimming from end to end in awe. He was like Tarzan, he thought, amazed. Everyone was watching him, the boys with envy and the girls with admiration. Charlie let the sunshine wash over him, and before he knew it, he was drifting in and out of sleep. Once again he was Spider-Man, and he was flying effortlessly through the dangerous streets of New York City. He could sense something in the air, and when he got closer, he observed a shifty-looking gentleman who seemed to be walking a little too close to a mother and her baby. Spidey got closer, and he could see her purse bobbing about precariously, and the shady gentleman was getting closer and closer to it. It wasn't difficult to guess what his motives were. Hello, viewers. Please sub me if you like it. Then the dodgy man was hovering over the pushchair and the sleeping baby, and the busy mother had no idea what was about to happen. Spider-Man swooped before he was too late, and his webbing wrapped itself around the man's wrist and left the baby, the mother, and the purse far from his grasp. Help! A familiar voice echoed around the pool, and Charlie came out of his daydream as if he'd been plucked out of the water himself. It was Tinker, thought Charlie. Thank you, viewers. Charlie in horror, and he ran over to the pool to see what was going on. Tinker was being pulled out of the pool, and the water and foam was coming out of his mouth, but his eyes were open. To Charlie's relief, a big burly man was thumping on his chest as a soaked and bewildered crowd gathered round. Charlie was sure that he'd seen the man before, and it took him a few seconds to realize who it was. Hello, viewers. Bobby said out loud, feeling at once relieved and afraid at the same time. Tinker was staring at Bob, and Charlie wondered if he was thinking the same thing. Tinker spluttered again, and he began to kick his arms and legs about and throw balls, and as Charlie got unsteadily to his feet, it was as if nothing had happened as Tinker slowly sat up and came back to life. Bob held out his bruised and hairy hand, and he pulled a shaken Tinker to his feet. Bye-bye. No problem, mate, said Bob with a crooked grin like a pirate. Maybe he's not so bad after all, thought Tinker, but inside he was not so sure. Tinker sat down on the deck chair unsteadily, and he dried himself with the big orange towel. Are you okay? Said Charlie, looking concerned, as Tinker breathed hard like a fish on the sand. I'll be okay in a minute, he said, and he lay back in the deck chair sleepily. Bob was hovering about for what was anyone's guess. Tinker decided to distract him by talking about girls. After all, they were surrounded by them in bathing suits as they lounged by the pool or swam elegantly in the sun-speckled water. Charlie had never thought much about girls. He thought that they were pretty, but he never knew what to do with them or what to say to them. He wished that he could be as cool as Spider-Man, but most of the time he felt like Clark Kent. Before he could think about it in any more detail, a girl approached him with her hand out. Tinker was still dozing as Charlie shook her hand softly. She had a strong grip. I'm Anne, she said, and she began telling him about all of the fun she was having and how much she hated school. That's one thing that we have in common, thought Charlie, relieved, and all the while she was talking to him, she was chewing gum, and she blew out a huge purple bubble and let it pop, much to Charlie's annoyance. He didn't like loud noises. It was difficult for him to concentrate on what she was saying, as he knew that another large pop would be coming round soon at any moment. She looked at Bob and she frowned, and then she scowled. What you looking at, mister? She said to him, to Charlie's amazement. And Bob spluttered like a broken engine, and then he made his excuses and left quickly. What a weirdo, she said, popping another big piece of gum. She made Charlie jump, but this time he was smiling. Thank you, viewers. I'll be back later. Thanks for subbing. Good night, everyone. Night, hi, Josh. Night, night. Please sub me, mate.